Earlier this week, Oklahoma and Texas submitted their formal request for invitations to the SEC, asking to become official members in 2025. Following our discussion on why Kansas would be a great fit for the Big Ten, we will now discuss why the Oklahoma State Cowboys could also find themselves a new home in the Big Ten as well. And if not the Big Ten, what other conference they may fit in. Now let's talk about that. Before we get into this video, apparently 95% of you are not subscribed to the channel. So, please make sure to subscribe to the channel if you have not already. It really helps the channel out and I'd really appreciate it. Now, let's talk about why Oklahoma State could fit in the Big Ten. First, let's get some history about the school. Before the school was officially called Oklahoma State, they were called Oklahoma A&M, and their mascot was the Tiger until 1923, when it changed over to the Cowboys. The school played independently from 1901 to 1914. Then from 1914 until 1924, they were part of the Southwest Conference with many household name schools, including Arkansas, Baylor, Oklahoma, Rice, SMU, Texas, Texas A&M, and TCU, among other smaller schools. Oklahoma A&M then left for the Missouri Valley Intercollegiate Athletic Association in 1924. They played against Kansas, Missouri, Nebraska, St. Louis, Iowa State, Drake, Kansas State, and Oklahoma until 1927, when the conference split into the Big Six and the Missouri Valley Conference. Oklahoma A&M played here until 1956, right before the school was elevated to university status and became known as Oklahoma State University. They spent the next season as an independent school before joining the Big 8 in 1957, which we now know today as the Big 12. The Oklahoma State Cowboys have become one of the more consistent football programs when it comes to the college game. Since Mike Gundy took over the head coaching job in 2005, they have put together a 137-67 record and have gone to a bowl game every year since 2006. When it comes to the Big 12 standings, this past decade they have the second most wins behind the Oklahoma Sooners with a 58-31 record. They earned a share of the Big 12 South Division in 2010 and won the conference in 2011. They bring a passionate fan base and have finished in the top 25 7 times since 2010. With the SEC adding Oklahoma and Texas, the Big Ten will need to add 2 teams that can compete at a high level in football. That is not something that can be said when it comes to Kansas. Although it's not the brand in football that Texas and Oklahoma are, they are the next best thing and may be able to compete for a Big Ten title right away and future playoff spots when the college football playoff does expand in a few years, whether that's 12 teams or 16. Football is where all the money is when it comes to college sports, and this may allow the Big Ten to increase the pot for each team rather than decrease it. In terms of basketball, Oklahoma State has had its ups and downs in the past decade. The only years that the Cowboys turned any heads were in 2012 and 2013, where freshman guard Marcus Smart led them to second in the Big 12 behind Kansas, and this past season when they finished 5th in the loaded Big 12, landing them a 4 seed in the NCAA tournament. In the past 10 years, they have made it to the NCAA tournament 5 times, never able to find their way to the second weekend. The program is on the rise under the helm of head coach Mike Boynton. This year will be Boynton's 4th year, and he looks to improve upon this past year. He has had great success recruiting thus far, bringing in 2020's #1 overall recruit Cade Cunningham, giving the Cowboys the 13th ranked recruiting class in the nation that year. Cunningham has stated a few occasions that he chose to come to Oklahoma State due to the genuine connection he felt with the program when Mike Boynton visited him early in the recruiting process at an AAU tournament. That, alongside his comments about how at home he felt in the program and the overall support from the coaches and teammates, foster a locker room that any player would want to be a part of. While Coach Boynton did not bring in any new freshmen from the upcoming season, he did net some notable players from the transfer portal, including Bryce Thompson from Kansas, Tyreek Smith from Texas Tech, and Musa Cece from Memphis. Overall, Coach Boynton appears to have the Cowboys on the rise from the basketball side of things. Oklahoma State has also had some strong teams outside the 2 major money-making sports as well. They have the 4th most NCAA team national championships out of any school with 52 national championships, as well as 10 national championships that were not bestowed by the NCAA or come from a non-NCAA sport. Since 2000, the school has had 17 national titles between cross-country, golf, wrestling, equestrian not bestowed by the NCAA, and rodeo, a non-NCAA sport. They also have other sports on the rise as well. Last season, Oklahoma State's softball team finished 2nd behind Oklahoma and made it to the semifinals before finally falling to Florida State. Oklahoma State University also had their women's basketball, soccer, and wrestling teams finish 3rd in the conference this past season as well. From here, we'll analyze where Oklahoma State will land. There are 5 potential options being talked about, those being either joining the Big Ten, the Pac-12, the American Athletic Conference, or the ACC, or the Big 12 could try to save itself by pulling in teams from the American Athletic Conference to replace Texas and Oklahoma. For simplicity's sake in this video, we will consider joining the AAC and redoing the Big 12 to be the same option, as many of the teams would remain the same. Let's begin with the most speculated upon option, which is Oklahoma State joining the Pac-12. There's only one real benefit for Oklahoma State joining the Pac-12, and that is if some of the Texas schools follow them. Joining the Pac-12 would help foster competition in basketball, but there are still debates if the Pac-12's presence in the NCAA tournament last year was more of a fluke or not. Oregon and USC are the only real competition football-wise to attract them to the conference, and beyond that, the only sport that would see major improvement in competition is softball. Oklahoma is a powerhouse in softball, but they are already leaving the Big 12. So joining the Pac-12 would give the Cowgirls the opportunity to regularly play teams like UCLA, Oregon, Washington, and Arizona, who has struck gold a few times as well. Honestly, the bigger winners here is the Pac-12 conference, as they would be entering a school that would help bolster their basketball and football resumes, as well as helping to attract Texas Big 12 teams to the Pac-12 as well. So in conclusion, the Pac-12 doesn't have much to offer that could improve Oklahoma State's current situation other than softball. Next, let's cover the idea of going to the ACC. This is arguably the least likely of the options for Oklahoma State due to their geographical location and what the conference has to offer. What the Big 12 has in basketball recently, the ACC isn't any guaranteed improvement, but it isn't a downgrade either if the Big 12 breaks up completely. However, football in the ACC is a one-team show, where Clemson dominates everyone else. Oklahoma State would be fighting for the second or third best team in the conference every year, which would not be the most ideal situation for them. That is all that really needs to be said for that option. If this is what works out, it would be due more to the failure of other conferences as opposed to what the ACC actually has to offer. Next is the idea of the Big 12 pulling teams from the American Athletic Conference to stay afloat. This is one of the more interesting options for Oklahoma State. The school's president has come out and stated how disappointed they are in Oklahoma for leaving the conference and how the two schools have had a long history of working together to do what was best for the state, and they did not feel like this was the right move for the state. It also took out Oklahoma State's biggest rivalry, which was the Bedlam series they had with the Sooners. Keeping the conference alive gives them the opportunity to pull Tulsa, one of the 2 other Division I colleges from Oklahoma, to create a new rivalry. It would also make the most geographical sense, as it would allow for the conference filled with schools mostly from Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. This would keep the basketball competition high, but would take a hit on the football side of the conference. Most importantly, is how difficult it would be to pull this off. At the end of the day, if teams like Iowa State and Kansas already want to leave for the Big Ten, then they will have to rely on enough American Athletic Conference teams wanting to leave to join the Power Conference, as well as Oklahoma State and other remaining Big 12 schools having the patience to let the correct deals work out. From the looks of all the models, it is basically the American Conference with the Big 12 name, and is why in previous videos I have made it more the American bringing in teams rather than the Big 12. Finally, we come to the option of Oklahoma State joining the Big Ten. I kind of talked about this already, but want to give a little more detail. Joining the Big Ten seems like an all-around great option for the Cowboys. They have one of the best basketball conferences in the nation and have at least 4 football teams that are constantly talked about on the national stage. They also have strong teams in most of the non-breadwinning sports as well. They also have a wrestling team, which is one of the sports that every single member school of the Big Ten has. The downside to joining the Big Ten would be the fact that Oklahoma State is not an AAU affiliated school, which the Big Ten takes pride in having schools being a part of that association, and it isn't as geographically relevant as trying to revive the Big 12 would be. But with schools like Michigan, Ohio State, and Wisconsin that are typically dominant in both football and basketball, as well as plenty of other schools being great at one or the other, Oklahoma State would fit right in competition-wise in the Big Ten. As long as the conference is willing to look past the AAU requirements, this would be the best place for Oklahoma State to reliably go to this upcoming season and be the most financially benefit one for the Big Ten. With Nebraska not being an AAU school any longer, it is a possibility. But where do you think Oklahoma State will end up after Texas and Oklahoma leave for the SEC? Let us know in the comment section below. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, check out some of my other videos right here. Don't forget to leave a like, share, and subscribe to the channel, and as always, remember to embrace the grind.